Sports Central will be going over next. Final prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Illinois Fighting Illini. And this is a team that was 6-7 last season, ended up having a pretty good season overall, making it to a bowl game, and also getting a couple pretty good wins down the stretch. But how will Illinois do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're also going to be going over your returning production along with a full prediction and preview on every game on the Illini schedule going into the 2020 season. So with that being said, let's look at your season trends from 2019. Of course, they were 4-4 between September and October, then 2-3 between November and the postseason. So, I mean, this is a team that started off pretty well. I mean, especially in the month of October, this team got a couple of major wins there. Obviously, they were able to beat off Wisconsin 24-23. That was clearly their big signature win of the season. I mean, Wisconsin last year was a national contender, and so for them to be able to knock off the Badgers there at home, yeah, that was quite a win there for Illinois. They also beat off Purdue on the road 24-6. Big game there as well, considering Purdue last season really, I mean, they didn't have a very good record, but that was a team with a lot of talent. So, I mean, in the end, that was a very good win there for Illinois as well. And they also beat off Michigan State on the road 37-34. So, yeah, 3 pretty good wins there for Illinois. Of course, they had several other close ones. So, I mean, this Illinois team could have easily had 7 or 8 wins last season. I mean, this team had the potential and the talent to do that. They just were not able to get that amount of wins up to that point. And obviously, I mean, once again, it only came down to those close games. They just were not able to finish off those close games. But in the end, they still got a few really good wins, especially that Wisconsin game there when they won that one 24-23. As far as the returning production looks, of course, you return your quarterbacks in Brandon Peters and Robinson. Matt Robinson, and of course, I mean, if you look at Brandon Peters last season, he's a pretty good quarterback, 1,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He also had a 55% completion rate. So, obviously, I'd consider him to be probably one of the lower-tier quarterbacks in the Big Ten last season, considering how his completion percentage was, which 55%, if you don't know, is actually a very bad completion percentage. And I believe that was one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the Big Ten last season. He did have a decent touchdown to interception ratio. He had an 18-8 there, which isn't terrible at all. But yeah, they also bring back Matt Robinson too. In last season, he put up 470 yards, a touchdown as well. But in the end, I'd expect Brandon Peters to still be your primary quarterback going into the 2020 season. So don't count on Matt Robinson beating him out. But as far as the running back core looks, of course, you return Reggie Corbin. Or actually, no, you lose him. You lose both of your running backs in Reggie Corbin and Dre Brown. And they, of course, combined for just over 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. Reggie Corbin last season had 700. Meanwhile, Dre Brown had just right around 670. So, in the end, they both had really good yardage, and it's going to be tough to not have them for this offense next season. And so, in the running back core, there is quite a bit of uncertainty there. I'd probably say that's the most uncertain part of this team in general. But as far as the receiving core goes, of course, you return your top one. In Joshua last season, I mean, he put up 630 yards with 9 touchdowns, which overall, pretty decent stats for a wide receiver. And then they also returned their second receiver in Donnie Navarro. And looking at him last season, he did put up 350 yards with 2 touchdowns. So he didn't put up the yardage in comparison to Josh, but in the end, he still put up a pretty decent season. And I mean, they don't really lose any other major wide receivers. I mean, looking at it for the most part, they return their top 2 receivers, and that's going to be big for Brandon Peters in general to be able to return his top 2 receivers there. But in the end, yeah, it's looking pretty good for this offense next season. Even though the running back core, there are still a couple of certainties there, as you are losing Reggie Corbin and Dre Brown. So watch out for that running back core. But in the end, other than that, the offense looks pretty good, I would say, for Illinois going into next season. They do lose 1 offensive lineman. They also lose 3 on the defensive line. So the defensive line is taking a couple big hits there. You also lose 1 linebacker and 1 in the secondary. So this defense loses 5 going into next season, which is just slightly above average, as most defenses, I would say, lose 3 to 4. So in the end, losing 5 is above average, but still, I think Illinois has got plenty of talent going into 2020. Brings up the question, chances of another bowl season in 2020. And of course, it was quite a surprise to see Illinois even make it to a bowl game last season, considering their past. But I mean, yeah, I mean, all around, it was not all that bad of a season in 2019. But looking forward to 2020, the problem is for Illinois going into next season is that you're not going to have your non-conference games. You're not going to have those easy wins that will help boost your ability to get to a bowl game. And the problem is for Illinois, I don't think that they've got the talent to have more wins than losses in a conference schedule, especially looking at next season. I mean, this is a team in a normal season that I could see putting up probably 6 wins. I could see them getting up to 6 or 7 wins next season, especially if they had a normal season. But the problem is you don't have those non-conference games and those easy ones to help boost your ability to get up to that 6-win threshold. So it's going to be very tough for Illinois next season to make a bowl game, and it's a big loss for them not to be able to play their 3 non-conference games, which we'll be getting into in a second. But yeah, chances of another bowl season, I would say, are much, much lower considering obviously considering how, one, the talent is on this team, and two, considering how they don't have their non-conference games. So you can't forget about that. But as far as your schedule looks, you start off the season at Rutgers, and you got a couple of road trips to start off your season, as you also play Nebraska in Lincoln on October 10th. Then you got Purdue and Minnesota both at home before traveling to Wisconsin to play them in Camp Randall on the 31st. And then in your November, you got Iowa. You also have Indiana, Ohio State, and then Northwestern finish it off. So, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty tough schedule too. You can't forget how tough of a schedule this is. I'd consider Illinois to probably have one of the toughest, I would say, conference schedules looking into 2020. I mean, you got to play Nebraska on the road, you got to play Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, and you can't forget about Indiana on the road, and you can't forget about Ohio State as well. So, I mean, basically all of these games are going to be very, very challenging for this Illinois team going into next season. And looking back at their non-conference games for next season, I'd say those would be 3 very easy wins. I mean, Illinois State, easy win. Same thing with UConn. Don't expect much out of them next season. And same thing with Bowling Green. So you'd have 3 pretty easy wins there. And it just hurts for this Illinois team, especially that they don't get to play those games, because it's going to be much tougher for them to be able to make it to a bowl, to make it to a bowl in 2020 because of that. But as far as the first 3 games on your schedule look, I think you're going to start off 1-0. I think you'll knock off Rutgers in New Jersey, and that's going to be a big win there for Illinois. Of course, Rutgers is a tougher place to play, mainly because of how much they are out of the Big Ten area. Of course, I mean, you got Rutgers and Maryland all the way on the East Coast, but otherwise, I mean, it's a pretty spread out conference, and so that's a pretty tough place to play. But I do think Illinois will get the win there. However, I do think you take a loss at Nebraska, and I also think you lose to Purdue on October 17th. So you're going to start off 1-2. However, from there, I just think, that middle part of your schedule is looking brutal. I think you lose those next 3 games against Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And I especially went back and forth on the Iowa game. I think Iowa could have a bit of a trouble game against Illinois there, and I think Illinois has the potential to possibly knock off Iowa in that one. However, I just think it doesn't happen. I do think Iowa ends up getting the win there in the end. However, that one will be a close one for sure. But Minnesota and Wisconsin, I'm pretty confident that Illinois will lose those next season. But of course, Wisconsin, they're going to be very motivated to beat Illinois next season, considering what happened in 2019 when Wisconsin went and played Illinois in Champaign. So you can't forget about that. But yeah, you'll start off the season 1-5. Obviously, not looking very good, considering how everything was last season. But the last 3 games, I do expect you to get a win in the last game of the season against Northwestern. However, I do think you take a loss at Indiana, and I also think you lose to Ohio State. I just don't see Ohio State taking a loss or taking an upset to Illinois next season. I mean, Ohio State is just going to be too good of a team in order for them to lose to a team like Illinois. So in the end, I'm sorry this is probably going to disappoint you Illinois fans, but it's going to be 2-7 for your record prediction going into the 2020 season. And I mean, obviously, it's just going to be a very tough schedule. You got several really tough games. Pretty much every game on this schedule going into 2020 is going to be a tough one. I mean, you got Rutgers, that's probably going to be your easiest one, and even that's a road game. I mean, you got to travel to Rutgers, you got to travel to Northwestern as well. I mean, those 2 games are going to be tough in general. It's just a very, very tough schedule for Illinois going into next season, and that's primarily the reason why I don't have them performing very well next season. But obviously, it goes back to those non-conference games. I mean, 2-7 does not look very good at all, but if you had those 3 non-conference games in there, this would easily be a 5-7 team. And if you did have those 3 non-conference games and you were able to start off 4-0, I mean, who knows? I think that would have set off Illinois to possibly give them a 6th win. It just depends on all of the momentum and everything. It just throws off the schedule when you don't have those non-conference games. But in the end, we're going to make do of it. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Illinois. Let me know if you disagree with anything here. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But then again, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. And if you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. I'd really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more. I will see you all later.